Hello everyone, I am back with another scrappy block tutorial. So let me show you how to do this one. It's actually super simple. It starts off with the 9 patch. So you will need 4 squares in a light colored and 5 squares in any color you want. I am just using from my scrap stash and all of my squares are 5-inch square. You can make them any size you want. I just figured this would be perfect because well, I have a lot of these and it would be great for a charm pack. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're just going to make a very basic 9 patch. We're just going to start with taking our middle piece and laying it right sides together with the pieces on our left, and then sewing those with a 1/4 inch seam. And then once we have done that, come back and then we will just sew on our last pieces to finish our rows. One thing I will note here, I am making sure that I am pressing my seams in opposite directions. So for my top and bottom row, I'm pressing towards the center, and for my middle row, I am pressing to the outside. This way my seams will nest nicely and I will have a nice flat block once I'm done. So then we'll just take our last pieces and lay them right sides together. And I guess I should have probably said that for those lighter squares, they will be in your outer corners. That is what is going to give you this effect for the block that I am making. Once we have sewn our rows together, or our squares into rows, we now need to sew those rows together. So I'm just going to lay those right sides together and then sew with a 1/4 inch seam. And then I will do the same thing with the bottom piece, attach it to the next, and then we will have our 9 patch. And then just because, quilters are crazy, we're going to sew it all together and then we're going to cut it all apart because that's what we like to do. So our middle blocks should be measuring 4.5 now because we started with a 5-inch square. So I am going to line up my 2.25 inch mark along with my seam. That way I should be able to cut right down the center and have both sides measuring 2.25 inches because we need to cut them in half exactly horizontally and vertically. So I'm just going to do the same thing here. Find my 2.25 inch line on my ruler and line it up with my seam. And then again, just cutting down the middle. Just be careful not to move your pieces apart too much. And if you do, just push them together. Now, normally, if you were making a disappearing 9 patch or something like that, you could just start moving your blocks around and sewing them together and you would get different effects. But for the block that I do want to make, we're going to have to make more cuts here before we start sewing together. I want it to look like this, so I need to cut my squares in half diagonally. And here we need to make sure that we're cutting from outer edge to outer edge. That way we will get the right effect. So if you just watch what I'm doing here, you're going to see how it all kind of works out, and then we're kind of going to have our centerpiece look like a diamond. So we're just going to cut again from outer edge to outer edge. If you cut down the center, yeah, you could sew it together and it would give a different effect as well, but you will not get the look of this block that I am making. So again, just from outer corner to outer corner, and I think you get the idea at this point here. I don't know, I just love making scrappy blocks, and I think these kind of blocks look really good with scrap fabrics, but they could also look really good with a nice charm pack and make it all look cohesive. Now we need to start swapping pieces around just so that we can get that look. And here it's your preference. You can decide how you want to do it, where you want to move your pieces. And honestly, I just always move around, and I often overthink this. But there you can see those 2 corner pieces that I just put together. We're going to have colors, the same colors touching, but we want it to look more scrappy. So I'm going to be moving blocks around until I get the look that I want. And if you want them to touch, that is fine. That's entirely up to you. You could leave them like this, but I personally don't want these 2 colors touching. I would prefer it if each block had different pieces. Sorry, apparently can't talk. Also, if you're making a bunch of blocks at the same time, you could actually take from one block to another block, and then it would get even more scrappy. It is entirely up to you how you want to do this. You can just play around with it until you get the look that you like. And then once you are happy with your placements, we can start sewing them together. And to sew these together, we're going to have to sew our half square triangles together first. So we're just going to lay them right sides together with each piece. And my seams are all nesting nicely because of the way I pressed my seams. It all worked out perfectly for me. So I'm just going to take them over to the sewing machine and sew them with a 1/4 inch seam. And here I am not worried about mixing them up. This is a scrappy block, so once I'm done sewing these together and pressing them, I can just figure out how I want them to go. It is not so picky where it has to be 100% perfect like some blocks are. And I think that's why I love scrappy blocks and scrappy quilts, because you can just do whatever you want and it still looks great in the end. So we should have 2 pieces that look like this and 2 pieces that look like this. So now we're just going to put them in the correct placement so that once we start putting all of our pieces together, we will get the effect that we want. So I'm just going to lay them out here so that you can see. You could switch them around, but you will not get the same effect. And I did make a few extra blocks because I usually just make a scrappy block for my scrap quilt, but I am making a few extras so that I can kind of give you an idea of what it would look like if you would put this in a whole quilt. And then this whole piece is just going to go into my scrap quilt. So we're just going to put this together like you normally would do a 4 patch. So with a 1/4 inch seam, put those two together and so forth. And I really hope that you enjoy these kind of videos. And if you do, I would appreciate if you would hit that thumbs up button and consider subscribing if you haven't already. So you can see what it looks like with just one block, but like I said, I would make a few extras just so that I could show you what kind of effect it gives. And I actually really like this, and I think you could make this into a nice big quilt with scraps, or like I said, get some charm packs and use those, and you would still get a beautiful quilt. And I absolutely love this, and I think maybe one day a whole quilt will be made like this, but I have so many projects that I need to do. But anyways, that's all I have for today. Thank you so much for stopping by, and until next time.